In 2003, a 15-year-old girl from Barbados walked into a hotel room to audition for a music producer she had never met. There were no cameras, no crowd, no guarantee that anything would come from it. Just a teenager standing in an unfamiliar room, singing 3 songs that might mean nothing the next day. But something unusual happened. Within minutes, that meeting would quietly set off a chain of events that would eventually turn her into one of the richest entertainers in the world. A billionaire. Not built from tours, not built from record sales, not even built from music alone, but from something far more uncommon. The ability to keep becoming someone new every time the world thought it had already defined her. Because Rihanna's story is not really about fame, it's about reinvention, and it begins far away from any stage. Before the world knew her as Rihanna, she was Robin Rihanna Fenty, growing up in Bridgetown, Barbados. On the surface, life looked ordinary. A small island, warm weather, tourists passing through. A place many people associated with escape. But inside her home, the atmosphere was far less stable. Her mother worked long hours to keep the household together, while her father struggled with alcohol and crack cocaine addiction. The balance of daily life often depended on whether the day was calm or unpredictable. Some days passed quietly, others did not. Arguments would rise suddenly and fill the house, shaping a childhood that felt uncertain in ways she didn't fully understand at the time. As a child, Rihanna also suffered from intense headaches. Doctors ran tests trying to find a physical cause, but nothing explained them clearly. Years later, she would reveal something revealing. Once her parents separated, the headaches stopped. The environment itself had been affecting her, so she turned inward, towards something that didn't change with the mood of the house. Music. It wasn't ambition at first, it was relief. A place where sound replaced tension, and where, for a few minutes, everything outside of it disappeared. That escape would quietly become the most important pattern of her life, because what started as comfort would eventually become direction. And soon opportunity arrived in the least expected way. Life-changing moments rarely arrive with warning. For Rihanna, it came through a visitor. In 2003, American producer Evan Rogers was in Barbados on vacation with his wife. Music wasn't part of his plan. He wasn't searching for talent. He wasn't building a career launchpad. Then someone mentioned a local girl who could sing. An audition was arranged. Several teenagers entered the room. One of them stood out immediately. Years later, Rogers would describe how, the moment Rihanna began performing, the others faded into the background. Not because they lacked ability, but because something else took over the room. Presence. It's difficult to define, but easy to recognize when it appears. The kind of presence that makes people stop multitasking without realizing they've done it. That moment changed everything. Demo recordings were made soon after. Then came travel to the United States. Then meetings with people who had built global careers from discovering unknown artists. And eventually, a meeting with Def Jam Recordings, a label led by Jay-Z. At that point, the path forward seemed to be forming on its own, but that's often where stories become complicated, because being noticed is not the same as being secure, and Rihanna was about to learn how quickly opportunity can turn into pressure. In 2005, Rihanna released her first major hit, Pon de Replay. The reaction was immediate. The industry responded like it had found something new. For most artists, this moment feels like arrival. But in music, arrival is an illusion, because the moment something works, expectations shift. The question is no longer whether you succeeded once, it becomes whether you can do it again. And again. And again. Rihanna entered a cycle that every rising artist eventually faces, where each release is no longer just a song, but a test of identity. She responded by working continuously. Albums followed in quick succession. Tours expanded. Her visibility increased across global markets. But success brings its own pressure system. The more people know your name, the more they expect from it. Then, in 2009, everything outside music suddenly became louder than music itself. Her assault by then-boyfriend Chris Brown became international news. It wasn't just a private event anymore, it was public narrative. For many public figures, moments like this become permanent definitions. Everything afterward is filtered through it. But what happened next mattered more than the event itself. Because Rihanna did not disappear, she kept moving forward, slowly but deliberately, rebuilding momentum in an environment that had become far more complicated than before. And somewhere in that process, a shift began to take shape. Not in her career, but in how she viewed it. At first, Rihanna thought like an artist. How do I make another hit? How do I stay relevant? How do I keep this going? But over time, a different question started forming underneath those ones. What happens if this doesn't last? Because in music, nothing is permanent. Songs rise and fall. Attention shifts. Audiences move on. Even the biggest names eventually get replaced by the next wave. Fame creates visibility, but visibility is fragile. What Rihanna began to notice was that millions of people were paying attention to her, not just as a musician, but as a brand without structure. And that realization changed the direction of her thinking. If attention exists, it can be organized. If influence exists, it can be built on. If fame exists, it can become something more durable. Most people in her position try to extend fame. She started thinking about how to convert it. That shift would eventually take her far outside the music industry. In 2017, Rihanna launched Fenty Beauty. At first, it looked like a familiar move, a celebrity attaching their name to a product line, something the market had seen many times before. And usually, those products followed a predictable pattern. Strong launch, short attention span, gradual decline. But Fenty Beauty didn't follow that pattern. The reason was simple. Rihanna didn't enter the beauty industry by copying it. She entered it by noticing what it had ignored. For years, many brands had offered limited shade ranges, leaving large groups of customers without suitable options. It wasn't a small gap, it was a structural one. Rihanna built directly into that gap. When Fenty Beauty launched, the range of foundation shades immediately stood out. Customers reacted not just to the product, but to what it represented. The response wasn't gradual, it was immediate. But the deeper shift wasn't in makeup, it was in perception. People felt included, and inclusion creates loyalty faster than advertising ever can. She repeated the same thinking with Savage X Fenty. Another brand built around representation and underserved audiences. The pattern became clear. Find what the industry ignores, build for it, scale it globally. Repeat. Music had created attention. Business was converting that attention into ownership. And ownership is where long-term power begins. At this stage, Rihanna was no longer operating like a performer. She was operating like a system builder. Because performers are limited by time. Systems are not. With Fenty Beauty and Savage X Fenty, production, distribution, marketing, and scaling were handled by teams, infrastructure, and global retail networks. The brands did not depend on her presence to function daily. That is leverage, and leverage changes the scale of everything. While she was working on music, the businesses continued operating and expanding. While she was not involved in day-to-day execution, growth continued. What started as personal fame had become an independent engine, a structure that could grow without requiring constant input from its founder. That is the difference between income and ownership, between attention and assets, between fame and control. Looking back at where it began, the contrast is striking. A girl in Barbados using music as an escape from instability, a teenager hoping for an opportunity, a young artist trying to be heard, and eventually one of the most financially successful entertainers in the world. Forbes would later estimate Rihanna's wealth in the billionaire range, driven largely not by music but by her ownership in Fenty Beauty and related ventures. That distinction matters, because music created visibility, but business created equity. And equity is what compounds. Millions of people earn income through attention. Very few convert attention into ownership. Rihanna crossed that line, and everything after that point followed a different logic. What makes Rihanna's story unusual is not just what she built, but how often she changed who she needed to be to build it. Singer, then global artist, then brand founder, then business owner, then empire operator. Each version required letting go of the previous one. And that's where most people struggle. Success creates identity, identity creates limitation. Rihanna repeatedly broke that pattern. Every reinvention expanded the ceiling above her. The titles changed, but the underlying behaviour didn't. Adapt, rebuild, expand. It's easy to look at Rihanna's story and assume it's about music, but music was only the starting point. The real story is about reinvention under pressure. Most people reach success and try to preserve it. Rihanna used it as raw material for the next version of herself. When the world saw a singer, she saw a brand. When the world saw fame, she saw infrastructure. When the world saw a celebrity, she saw ownership. And that's why she became difficult to replace. Because she never stayed the same long enough to be defined by one version of herself. A girl once used music to escape her environment. Years later, she built an empire by refusing to remain in it. And that is the real reason Rihanna became wealthy. Not fame, not music, reinvention. If you enjoyed this content, please like and subscribe as it really helps our channel grow.